Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lunch Break Science. I'm Ariel Johnson from the Leakey Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting human evolution research and sharing discoveries. Today, we will be rebroadcasting an episode featuring Dr. Onja Razafindratsima. It is a wonderful episode, and I hope you really enjoy it. Onja is a recipient of the prestigious Baldwin Fellowship, and this year marks the 45th anniversary of the Leakey Foundation's Baldwin Fellowship Program, which has been fulfilling students' dreams of studying human origins since 1978. This year, a record number of scholars have applied for assistance. The need for meeting this growing demand and supporting the next generation of global leaders has never been greater, and I wanted to turn to my lunch break science friends for help. In honor of our 45th anniversary, all donations up to $4,500 will be matched. This doubles your impact. Your contribution, no matter the amount, will make a significant difference in the lives of these bright and talented students. Donate today and be part of their incredible journey and advancing the field of human origins. Together, we can shape the future of science. Now, I'll turn the rebroadcast floor over to Dr. Onja Razafindratsima.
Onj, thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
Onj is joining us from California, where she is an assistant professor in the Department of Integrative Biology at University of California, Berkeley. Onj originally hails from Madagascar and studies rainforest ecology in Ranamafana National Park in southeastern Madagascar, which we took a nice long little flight to. And we're going to see some gorgeous pictures of this first location. It's just so beautiful. And then she also works at Oof Forest in the eastern part of Madagascar, which we will be seeing in just a second. And Onja is also a National Geographic explorer, which is really thrilling. Oh, these are just such gorgeous locations. I wish I was there right now. So before we hear from Onj, if you are watching this episode live, please post comments or questions in the chat, and Onj will answer them live during the episode. The earlier you get those questions in, the more likely your question will be featured. So my first question for you, Onj, is what do conservation and ecology have to do with human evolution?
I think there are some aspects of ecology that can be important to understand human evolution. So, for example, studies of primate behavioral ecology and traits can help shed some light on some aspects of human evolution. And currently, we're facing major environmental changes that are affecting the ecology of many organisms and even the quality of their habitat and resources availability. So working towards biodiversity conservation in general can provide us an opportunity to maintain biodiversity that has been existing and co-evolving with us.
And what are the species of lemur that you get to work with, and what are the differences between them?
So I've been focusing most of my research on 3 lemur species. I have Lemur Rebroadcast, which is red-bellied lemur, so also known as Parker male in Madagascar, and Lemur Rufifrons, red-fronted brown lemur, so Parker male in Madagascar, and Paresia variegata editorum, black and white rough lemur, so Parisas. They are highly frugivorous and are actually among the largest frugivores in Madagascar. They differ in several morphological and behavioral traits. The obvious morphological difference would be the color pattern. And also the ruffed lemurs tend to be in smaller groups, so they are sometimes easier to follow, a little bit easier to follow than the lemur rufifrons, for example, which tend to travel in larger groups. And these 3 lemur species have some overlap in their diet in terms of plant species that they consume, but there are some plant species that are only consumed by one of the other species.
Beautiful. So when did you first see lemurs in the wild?
So that would be when I was in 10th grade, sometime in high school. So I grew up in the capital city of Antananarivo in Madagascar, and we went on a school field trip in Andasi Bay in the eastern part of Madagascar as part of activities of a club of environmentalists that I was involved in. And that's where I first saw lemurs in the wild. And if I remember correctly, the first lemur species I saw was a brown lemur, Lemur filipus. And then we also saw some ingri as well.
It's amazing the diversity of the different lemurs.
Yeah, so that's the ingri, one of the largest lemurs, or the largest.
Oh, it just must have been so thrilling to get to see them in the wild.
That's me when I was young, in 10th grade, in high school, and when we went to Andasi Bay.
Oh, I love it. So what was your path from that experience to where you are now studying lemurs?
Well, so after that, I was still heavily involved in the high school environmentalist club. And so we were able to go on a couple of field trips. So that's one our group we went to, I believe was visiting one of the national parks. I don't remember exactly, but one of the trips brought us to Ranmorfana National Park in the southeastern part of Madagascar. I feel so emotional seeing my old pictures. So in the last year of high school, where I met a group of scientists conducting field research that involved watching animals every day while camping in the rainforest. And I didn't realize at that time that could be a job and I could do something like that. And I was so fascinated by the idea that I could be camping and then watching animals every day, and that's a job. So later, I decided to enroll in natural sciences at the University of Antananarivo. I didn't actually study lemurs until later when I was a master's student. So in Madagascar, we have this very cool system in which all foreigners conducting field research there should hire and mentor one Malagasy student for capacity building. So I was paired to work with Barbara Martinez, who was a PhD student from the University of Minnesota at that time. And she was studying the ecology of red-ruffed lemurs in the northeastern part of Madagascar. So she trained me in various techniques of how to follow lemurs, how to record their behavior, how to set up plots to understand the availability of fruits that they have. And so with her mentorship, I developed my own research proposal that aligned with the general objectives of her research. So, and I was so curious about a lot of things. And so that curiosity made me want to learn more. And so I started discussing with Barbara about pursuing a PhD degree. And so she gave me advice and direction about PhD programs in the US. And then she helped me with all the different processes. So to make that story short, I got accepted into a PhD program at Rice University in Houston, Texas, to work with Amy Dunham. And then after graduating from Rice and then a year of postdoctoral position in the same lab, I was selected as a Harvey Fellow in Conservation Biology at Harvard University. And as a Harvard Fellow, I had the opportunity to lead an independent research project and then teach an undergraduate course on conservation biology. And then I gained more teaching and research experience as visiting assistant professor, and now I'm currently an assistant professor here at UC Berkeley.
It's really neat to have you at UC Berkeley and be so close to the Leakey Foundation headquarters. I think we're in San Francisco, and you're, I think, the closest guest we've had on Lunch Break Science so far. And when you were at Rice, you did some outreach with the Leakey Foundation. We are just so incredibly grateful, and I've heard about you since then. I'm like, oh, we have to collaborate at some point. So I'm really excited to be able to feature you. How did being awarded the Leakey Foundation Baldwin Fellowship impact your career?
So I was awarded the Baldwin Fellowship in my second and third year of PhD. And it was, and I think it still is, a great honor to be selected for such a very prestigious fellowship. And it was not just like a financial aid, which is great in that sense, because we needed money as a student, but it also provided me an opportunity to get higher qualification and the training I needed to succeed as a scientist, to develop and improve my skills as a scientist. And even just like, for example, writing that proposal and the related report letter helped me in framing my ideas better and in explaining my work to people outside of my specific field. So I'm very grateful for the Leakey Foundation for that fellowship. These are some pictures of me in the field when I was a PhD student.
Yeah, the Leakey Foundation Baldwin's fellowship program helps students from countries with limited opportunities for advanced education related to human origins research. And to echo what Onj said, this fellowship offers crucial opportunities to help develop skills as a scientist. And to learn more about this program and the qualifications, we've shared a link in the chat, so please check that out. But we've received a record number of applications this past year and are working to raise $90,000 to fund an additional 7 fellowships. So we would love your help to make this possible. Donations made to the Baldwin Fellowship Program will actually be quadrupled matched thanks to a very generous sponsors. And so that basically means that like if you give $25, you'll have $100 worth of impact, which is just really amazing. So we're, as I said, grateful to our sponsors for this challenge and for all of you out there who, support the Leakey Foundation. So my next question for you has to do with something I absolutely loved talking about with you when we first met to talk about this episode. You mentioned that you have a dream project you have. Tell us about it.
Yes. So my dream project, I have so many projects, but just as a side thing, I was talking about getting water earlier, just aside. So I have this mug that my PhD advisor gave me before. And it says it's a lemur mug. It says my plan for world domination involves lots and lots of lemurs. So one of my dream projects would definitely involve lots and lots of lemurs.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
The dream project I was talking to Ariel before was like involved the training and mentoring of more Malagasy scientists to become leaders in conservation in Madagascar. That will go beyond training and assistantship in the field to truly help build a new generation of Malagasy students and researchers who will be at the forefront of conservation research in Madagascar. So that's my dream project. It may involve lemurs in some ways, but I really want to build that new generations of Malagasy scientists to be the leaders of conservation in Madagascar. So that would be my dream project.
Well, it's really exciting to hear about, and I hope that you'll come back and be further along and get to tell us about it. So, what is a typical day like in the field for you and your team?
Ooh, this is actually my favorite question.
Actually, mine too.
Because I really like talking about my field work. So we usually camp inside the rainforest, and so we have this small village made of tents and tarps. This is one of our field sites, and so a typical day, if we ever have it, one typical day, would be that we wake up to birds singing and river flowing in a very peaceful sound. It sounds very magical, which is, and I'm looking forward to go to the field in a month. And so we'll have some delicious Malagasy food before heading to searching for lemurs. And the whole day will just consist of following lemur groups to collect data on the movement, the feeding, and the defecation. These are some of the yummy Malagasy foods that I love. And then we may collect these species and then process them back at our lab on camp, which is just a table next to the kitchen on camp. It's not a fancy lab. And since our team divides in like small groups during the day to do different activities, we spend the evening catching up on the cool stuff that everyone was doing during the day, relaxing by the campfire and making dinner and maybe playing some cards. It's fun. I really enjoy field work, as you can tell.
It's such a beautiful location to be. I can't imagine. So I am so excited to hear more about your work, and we'll be going into your talk very shortly. But before we turn the virtual floor over to you, Onj, if you are enjoying this episode of Lunch Break Science, be sure to subscribe and click the little bell to receive notifications so you'll be the first to hear about upcoming episodes and more. So now let's turn the virtual floor over to you, Onj, and hear more about your research.
Okay, thank you. So today I decided to talk about some aspect of the mutualistic interactions between lemurs and the food plants, as I've been devoting a large proportion of my career working on that topic. And so specifically, I'm interested in the interactions between lemur frugivores and the plants that they consume in the form of providing seed dispersal services. And I'm approaching that topic from both ecological and conservation standpoints because I'm dealing with a very unique system and highly threatened species. And the basic idea is that these lemur frugivores will consume the fruits whole and then defecate the seeds throughout the forest. And the passage of the seeds through the gut will improve seed germination. But seed dispersal is a little bit more complex than that. It's actually an important process in plant life cycle. It influences the plant population dynamics because the seeds are transported away from the vicinity of the parent plant where competition among siblings may be high. And it also allows plants to reach and colonize new habitats. So in that way, seed dispersal can ensure the long-term survival of the plant species and can have some cascading impact on ecosystem functioning and maintenance of biodiversity. It does affect the maintenance of diversity within a plant community because the seeds that fall to the ground, known as the seed rain, form this initial template for future vegetation composition that will determine the structure of the plant community. So in fact, seed dispersal determines the plant spatial patterns, which may then influence their interactions with other plants, either through competition or facilitation, as well as their interactions with abiotic factor and natural enemies. And all of that will influence community composition and diversity because they are affecting plant survival. So in that sense, seed dispersal by animals is even more critical in biodiversity hotspots like in Madagascar, where the majority of the highly diverse flora depend on animals for their seed dispersal. So, for example, in the rainforest of Ranmafara National Park that you saw earlier, where I've been conducting my research, up to 87% of trees and large shrubs are dispersed by frugivores, and then the majority of these are primarily dispersed by lemurs. So what I'm interested in is to understand the impact of seed dispersal by lemurs on plants at multiple levels, from population level to the community and ecosystem. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been conducting research on these three lemur species, Lemur rufifrons, Lemur riventer, and Paresia variegata editorum, which are among the largest frugivores in Madagascar. And because these large-sized lemur frugivores are able to disperse the seeds of many plant species with a wide range of size, from small ones, so for example, the seeds of strawberry guavas that you can see on the, I'm not sure where the left and right here anymore, but like the Psidium catalenium from the feces of Lemur preventer, and they're also able to disperse the large one, like the seeds of Cryptocarya crassifolia. But because they are the largest frugivores in the system, they are the primary responsible for the dispersal of the large seeded plant species. And to address my main goal of understanding the impact of seed dispersal by lemurs on plants, we collect various kinds of data and use different approaches. That includes lemur follows to collect data on their movement, feeding, and defecation. We also do some experiments with seeds and different microhabitats. We also monitor fruit and phenology. We do some vegetation surveys. We collect seeds and feces using cups that look like little baskets. We analyze traits, do some simulations. So there are many different approaches and like field-based and also like statistical analysis that we use to address our questions. And one of the points that we found was that lemurs disperse seeds in a non-random way. This is because they forage and use habitat in a very non-random way. So what I mean by that would be like, for example, the case of these lemur refugons, they tend to turn back to their previous location often. So like they backtrack, so they go to one place and they always go back. And even if they move around the whole day, starting at one point, they always return to certain trees for feeding or for resting. So basically, they repetitively use the same route within their habitat with frequently reuse of certain trees or certain sites. And so by what this means is that the seeds may be deposited into these frequently used areas. And one of such impact can be observed in the recruitment pattern of Cryptocarya crassifolia. This is a long-lived canopy tree that is being dispersed by the free lemur species. So we compared the probability recruitment of the seeds that were non-randomly dispersed by the free lemur species, and then the seeds that were not dispersed, but just dropped under a parent plant. And so we use this based on the data on the observation of 3 groups of each one of the lemur species and data on seed bed experiments. So we planted seeds in different locations of where the lemurs would disperse seeds. And what we found was that the seeds that were dispersed by this lemur species had high seedling recruitment, and like compared to the seeds that just dropped under the parent plant, with an estimated 4-fold higher recruitment probability for seeds by lemur, like dispersed by lemurs, than the seeds that were not dispersed. And the main reason for this observation is because these lemurs tend to deposit seeds in microhabitats that are suitable for the germination of this specific plant species. So specifically, like under microhabitats that have more open canopy cover and away from the parent plant. And another point that we also found was that these lemur frugivores tend to bias seed dispersal near fruiting trees where they recently fed, because they spend a large proportion of their time foraging for fruits and hanging around fruiting trees, and sometimes they defecate while they're foraging or even between feeding buds. And so this behavior resulted in non-random association between dispersed seeds and their adult neighbor. So, for example, if let's say these 2 plant species are fruiting at the same time, and they are dispersed by the same lemur, seed dispersers, their seeds will be dispersed under each other. So basically, the lemurs structure this early stage pattern of plant community structure. And these seed adult associations are critical because the proximity of the seed with other plants could influence its interactions with both biotic and abiotic environment, as well as its survival and recruitment success. And the last point I want to talk about is that we also found that because the seed dispersal service can have this critical impact on the demography of the plants that they interact with, losing these lemurs can have some cascading impact on the ecosystem. So we found that it can also affect the ability of the forest to provide vital goods and services to human society. For example, carbon storage, by influencing the ability of the forest to store the carbon, as an example. And also, the absence of this lemur seed disperser from an area also affects the structure and regeneration pattern in the forest. And so that's my research in a very small, in a nutshell. These are some of my research findings. I tried to cover in a very brief amount of time, but there are still a lot of questions to be answered about seed dispersal by lemurs. And my lab still continues working on this topic, and you might hear more about my what lemurs are doing with plants in the near future. But before Ariel comes back and asks questions, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my amazing team of local field technicians and students who have helped me in many ways, and they've played very critical roles in the success of my research. So everything I've been presenting in my research, it hasn't been possible without the knowledge and the help and everything they did. So really grateful for the help.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing talk. And I'm really excited to get to the question. So if you have not submitted your question for Onja, please be sure to do so right now. Our first question comes from H. It was early on. Okay. H asks, could you tell us a little bit about how the COVID-19 pandemic affected Madagascar?
Yeah, well, it did affect Madagascar the same way as every other place, anywhere else as well. But I also think, because Madagascar rely a lot on tourism as part of the income, and I think it really affected the livelihoods of the Malagasy people, because the tourism industry was closed for a long time. And yeah, there were the flights there were no flights before, and so it did affect the economy in that sense. And also thinking about, if I'm thinking specifically about my research in general, or fieldwork, lemur research or fieldwork in general, it also has impacted not only people unable to go to Madagascar to do research, but also the local communities unable to go into the forest and do research, or the local community gaining some income from the research that they are usually doing.
Well, thank you for your answer, and H, thank you for your question. Our next question actually has to do with tourism from Jeannie. How does tourism affect the Madagascar environment and lemur habitat?
I'm not sure if I'm the correct person to answer because I'm not very know much about what's going on with the tourism industry. The small things I can say maybe that it has some benefits in lemur conservation in many ways, because for one thing it helps with the protection of the habitat, because the tourism again brings money in Madagascar, and it can be used to to protect the lemurs. People are interested in like seeing lemurs. That's where the only place you can see lemurs in the wild. So I would say that it has some benefits on lemur conservation and habitat in Madagascar. But again, I don't know if that's very satisfying as a response, but I might not be the right person to answer about tourism in Madagascar.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll have to maybe think about having more on lemur conservation and
Yeah.
in future episodes. So our next question comes from Pete. Pete asks, are the lemurs able to find fruit all year, and do they travel depending on what is ripe?
Yes, they are able to find fruits all year, but there is always a but in here. It's like, so the fruits are like the trees are fruiting year round, but the peak or like the abundance differ across season. So like they may be able to find some fruits, and also the distribution, the spatial. So it's the spatial and temporal distribution of the fruits vary. So like they may have to travel really far away to find fruits during some time, or some days they may just like find fruits in one place and do not move. So like even that availability of food resources also affect the movement and where they will find fruits. Yeah.
Really interesting. So we actually, Jeannie has another question for you. That kind of goes along with this. Has climate change affected the lemur's environment, such as the timing of the ripening of fruit? It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, so going back to that, like the abundance of foods that are of fooding, climate change, I think there have been changes in when fruits are, like trees are fruiting, and the abundance as well, because it gets a little bit like drier and so less fruits, and eventually that will affect the available resources of the lemurs.
Really interesting. And Ruben has another good question. They're working really good questions today. Ruben says, I saw an article about singing lemurs in Madagascar. Have you noticed them singing different songs based on when they find different fruit?
Very interesting. And I really like that question, but I don't know, like I haven't noticed that, but I want to know, and I will pay attention when I go to Madagascar this May, trying to see if there are like some different songs.
Well,
I'm intrigued.
report back to us.
And
You have to report back to us. So let's hear. Well, who's our next question from? Let's see here. Jan. Our next question comes from Jan from our website, and she asks, many species of lemurs are threatened. What would a world without lemurs look like, and how would that impact the ecosystem? Ooh.
I don't want to get to that world though, that there are no lemurs. Yeah, how the world without lemurs would look like. So if I'm thinking about them as providing these critical ecosystem services, a world without lemurs would mean that the habitat will also change, because the seeds are not gonna get dispersed, and the trees there will not be new seedlings and new saplings and new trees to replace, and that will change a lot of the communities of plants. And by changing the communities of plants, that will also change the community of other animals in the forest, because many other animals also rely on those trees for shelter, for food, for many other things. So yeah, there will be a lot of changes, and I really don't want to get to that place where we don't have lemurs. Not just because of like how it may affect our world, but also because I want to protect them and I want to have them forever for the future generations to enjoy and appreciate.
Absolutely. And hopefully, with conservation efforts and people like you, talking about lemurs, we'll get more information out there and help protect them. Okay, so our next question actually comes also from Jeannie. Are there any other scientists in your family who became your role models?
No, I'm a first generation with higher education. No one in my family is doing science. My parents didn't even go to middle school. They stopped in primary school, only able to like read and count, very basic counting. And then my siblings, some of them did went to the university, but like none of them were scientists, and so I'm first generation, and none of my cousins at that time. Now I have more cousins who went to university, like for college students, but at that time when it started, I didn't have anyone as role models. That's one of the things too. Like I didn't even know what they were for the scientists. Like I learned science in school, but like it didn't catch into my head that someone like me could do that because I didn't have anyone like me doing that.
Well, congratulations. Your work is so important and amazing, and like you're a role model of so many. Our next question comes from Brandon. Brandon asks, "What is the most challenging part of your field work, and what is the most rewarding part?" Good bookend question.
Yeah. So I would say the most challenging is trying to find a group of lemurs in the morning. Sometimes they're super hard to find, and I'm doing a non-invasive approach where like none of the lemur groups we study have any collapse or anything, so we rely on the like prior knowledge of like where to find these groups. And sometimes that's hard because sometimes we hike for hours and hours and just nothing. Sometimes we're lucky and they come to our camp in the morning and wake us up and let's go. But most of the time it's just very challenging to find the lemurs. What's most rewarding for my field work wise, I think it's the joy of being in the forest and the joy of working with my fellow Malagasy folks. I really enjoy being. I have this big extended family in the forest working with me, and I really love that. And yeah, it's just like I'm looking for like we're planning to go to Madagascar in May, and I can't stop talking about it because like it's possible to go to Madagascar now because like. Yeah. I wasn't able to go for the past it's almost 3 years. And now like I can go, and I've been talking about it every single day. My lab may be like tired of me listening about that, speaking, talking about that every single day, but like I wanna go because I miss that. Like I miss my family, like my actual family in Madagascar, but also miss my extended family in the forest and my camp and my tent and being there in the forest. I just love it.
Well, it's just exciting to hear, your passion and that you're really doing what you love doing. Our next question comes from Diane. Diane from our website and asks, the Malagasy food looks delicious. Can you tell us what is being served?
Ooh, so we do eat a lot of rice. That's one of this is like rice and some vegetables that we have. This is one of our food when we were doing field work, and so it's usually rice and something. Anything that you can eat with rice and call it Malagasy food. Even French fries. The last picture that you just saw, that's my favorite dish actually. No, the one after that.
Okay.
The one with the beans.
It'll be up just a second, yeah.
It's also beans. I want to call them beans, but they're underground. So I have no idea what it's called. I've been trying to find. Like I've seen one store in the US selling them, and it's called they sell it as yellow beans. Mm-hmm. But that's my favorite beans ever. And yeah.
Well, They look delicious.
It is very delicious. And you just like make some tomato sauce and just cook it in. Oh, you can also like cook it in coconut milk or something and eat with rice.
We have another question, I believe, from Ruben. Let's see here. Oh, can we get that mug somewhere?
I actually don't know. It was a gift from my PhD advisor. I can ask her and let people know.
No, well, you want let's take a up close look at the mug. One.
I don't know. Maybe this way. Is it clear enough?
Sorry. Yeah. It's such a cool mug. So my last question for you is: do you have any advice for those just starting out or hoping to pursue a career in science?
Very good question. So one thing that I would say to those who are just starting or just curious is just keep being curious. And also like find something that you're passionate about and go for it. You may not have like the perfect research question right away. You may not have the perfect approach to address that question, but I think that's the beauty of science. You get to test your ideas, test your hypothesis about something that you're curious about, and the answer to that will lead you to another exciting question, and then you keep exploring. So like having that curiosity and like going for it and being passionate about it, I think everything else will fall in, because if you're not passionate, if you're not interested in doing, like nothing will matter in that sense. That's how I see it. Find that something that you're passionate about and just go for it. And it's okay to be curious. It is good to be curious.
Absolutely. And that's really that, that staying curious is great advice for all of us.
Yes.
So, well, Onja, thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you very much, Ariel, for like inviting me to be here and be part of this series. And as we say in Madagascar, we such a pizza. So thank you.
Thank you all for watching this rebroadcast. We are looking forward to having new episodes starting in June. Thank you all for taking a break from your day and feeding your brain with the Leakey Foundation. Until next time, stay hungry for knowledge.